Do you want to upgrade the look of your car with some new wheels, but you're not sure which wheels to choose? Or maybe you're a digital artist and you want to give your art options like this or like this. Either way, this video is going to be your guide on how to change wheels on a car using Adobe Photoshop like a pro. Hopping into Photoshop, and this is a legendary photo, but this is not really the best photo to start with. You'll notice if I draw a line directly through the middle of the rear wheel, and then if we look at the angle of the front wheel, this is actually at a different angle, which is a problem because it's going to make it more difficult for us to actually make the wheels look right. What I would suggest if you're just starting out is to actually go with the simpler photo. And if we draw a line through the center line of the wheels here, you'll notice everything is at the same angle, which makes this a lot easier to swap out the wheels simply. Keeping it simple at the start is going to be the key to you mastering swapping and replacing in Photoshop. By the end of this video, we're going to layer these skills and you will be an expert. So go ahead and grab a good photo of your car. Don't worry, I'll sit here and wait. I'm joking. Or you can download the photos that I'm using in the description and follow along with the exact process. We will come back to that other photo, but the first thing we want to do is actually just grab the ellipse tool. Now, one thing you could do to make this easier on yourself is up here in the ruler area. You can grab inside the ruler and you could just pull down a guide, pull it down to right around the edge of the lip, in between the lip and the bead. And then we'll do the same thing on this side. And now I can take my ellipse tool and I can simply draw a circle shape right over that wheel. And we'll want to clean this up. Usually no outline. And then I will fill it with whatever the darkest color is around the wheel. So go look inside the wheel well. If you just click inside there, you should get like a really deep black. Sometimes it'll be a dark gray, a dark bluish gray. But you just want to get that nice deep color so that it looks like the wheel is essentially gone from the car. Now, we'll do the same thing to the back end of the car. You could just use the same guide for the top, and then we can get a new guide for the side, go back to our ellipse tool, and the same thing on the back of the car. And now, we've got a hubless car from the future. No, I'm joking. But we do have the wheels removed from the car. And so now we've got this image ready to accept any new wheel you can literally find on the internet. But we're missing something. This car has no brakes. And if we put wheels on top of this right now, it'll look okay, but it won't look realistic. So let's first go and get some brakes from the internet. And before we grab those assets for this tutorial, I do want to say thank you to the almost 2,000 of you that have already subscribed. And I'm on the push to just reach more people with this content. So if you're a digital artist and you've learned something so far, or if you're into cars and car art, I'd love to have you along for the journey. The subscription does really help, or give the video a like, drop a comment. You know how YouTube works, but I just wanted to say thank you. And now we need a good stock photo of some brakes. So go to your search engine of choice and we'll literally just type in Nissan GTR brakes. And what you should see is a bunch of just parts photos, and this is exactly what we want. So let's go to images. We're going to want something that's pretty high quality and something that's already kind of oriented, like this one or this one. This one I think is going to be pretty spot on. Let's take a look back at our photo, taking just note visually of the angle. I think I'm going to go with this one here. So we're going to just click on the image. And I'm right clicking, or I guess you could command click if you're on an Apple. Go to copy image. I'm going to take this back over to Photoshop, and we're simply going to paste the image into our photo. And now what we can do is just kind of clean this up. We will first attempt to see if the object selection tool will pick the brakes out of the photo. Let's see if it'll grab it. Hey, let's go Photoshop. All right, looks like Photoshop grabbed most of it, and that's exactly what we want. So I'm going to use my lasso tool to clean up this selection. I'm just going to hold down the Alt key when I'm doing this, and that allows us to deselect portions of this. So I'm just going to deselect this little chunk that's not actually part of the brakes. Everything else looks really clean. All right, and now we can simply add a layer mask, or we can just cut and paste this out of this photo. Perfect. So now that we have these brakes selected on their own layer, I'm actually going to remove the ellipse that I put on the car. And what I want to do is just take this photo and I want to line it up with where the actual brakes are. So we're going to put it right in here. This is actually looks like a brake upgrade in this case, maybe, or just a newer version of these brakes, but we've got this lined up to where this would be inside the wheel. And what you'll notice is that in the position that it's in right now, the brake is actually clipping into the wheel tire section of the car, which is actually what you want. This is what's going to make this look real. And so when I hit enter, we know that the brake is in the right place. I'm going to put my ellipse back, and then I'm just going to drag this layer right on top of the ellipse layer. And then with my mouse, I'm going to hover in between those two layers. So I'm in between the ellipse layer and layer one. And then I'm going to hold down the Alt key. You'll see your icon change to this box with a little black arrow. I'm going to click. And what it does is it clips the top layer into the bottom layer. And now you can see the brake is actually inside the wheel. Just doing that adds a super cool level of realism to this. And this is exactly what you want. Now, you might think that at this point, we're going to go ahead and duplicate this on the back end of the car. However, because of the angle of this car, what I want to do is actually finish up the front end of the car here, and then we'll just duplicate the whole thing into the back side of the car and adjust it from there. It'll make it really, really easy to get this completed. So the next step is going to be to select some wheels. So now we're back to the internet and I'm on one of my favorite sites to go and look at car parts that I can't afford. But the great part about doing a site like this is that you can actually search by your specific car or a car just like your car, and you can find parts that actually fit. So if you're doing this because you want to spec out some wheels for your car, this is the best way to do this. And you can select any of these. For this example, let's go with these Kansai K&P wheels. I really like that actually might look really good on the car anyway. Um, and so one thing you can note here is that we were talking, remember, about having two different angles of the wheels on that other photo. We'll come back to that, but you'll notice on some of these, you do have two different photos, which is great. You'll need those later. For this one, we just need this 3/4 view angle of the wheel. And the easiest way to do this is we're going to just copy the image. So I just right click or command click on the image on the internet. And then come back to our photo here. And we're going to paste that image in here. And so what's happening here is that it put in black because I think this image already has transparency in it. So let's go back to the internet and I'm going to download the image. So I'm going to right click or command click on the image, do save image as, and then this is going to get me to save this into my downloads folder. And I just want to see if I open up this file, if it's going to allow me to actually have that transparent background already, because that makes it easier for you. Copy that image in. And now let's see, we do. Awesome. I love the internet. This makes it super easy. So if you can find a photo that's already got a transparent background, this is going to make it easy for you. If you can't, I'll show you really quick how to do this. We're just going to click on that layer that doesn't have the transparent background, and we're going to select wand tool. Sometimes the object selection tool doesn't always get the wheel from the background, but on this one, the spokes are chunky enough. So we're just going to hold down our right click button, and then I'm going to hold down shift. I'm actually going to select everything around that. And then I'm going to go in and systematically select all of the negative space in this wheel. And my tolerance is somewhere around 25 right now, depending on if the photo has a black or a white background and the wheel is contrasting that enough, you might need to change that tolerance either up or down so that you can catch just the right areas of the wheel. But now that we've got this all selected, I'm just going to hit the delete key. And now you'll see that we have essentially what we already have with this uh, PNG the transparent background file that we downloaded. So either way is a way that you can do this. Now we've got a wheel that we are ready to pop into this hole on our car. And what we want to do, I'm going to drop the transparency just a little bit so I can see behind it. And then we're going to zoom in here and we're going to take this wheel to above the brakes. And then I'm going to do that same technique. So hover in between the layers, hold down the Alt key, click, and then it's going to clip that wheel inside all of this space. Now we just want to use our transform tool. And so with this layer selected, I'm going to Command or Control, and then at the same time hit the T key. And now we can transform this wheel by itself. I'm going to line up where the lip of the wheel would hit the bead of the tire. And then I'm going to just line this up with all of these edges here. And what you'll find is it's not going to be a perfect lineup. So what you'll need to do is either hold down the control if you're on a PC or command key over the top of one of these anchor points. You'll see that my anchor turns white, my arrow turns white with this double arrow on it. And that means that I can move this around wherever I want. So now I'm just going to adjust this to where that lip fits right inside that circle. You'll also see that the bolt pattern is starting to line up with where the brakes are. I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm just going to pull this back up. And so this will be level one of changing the wheel. We've got all of the components there. Now you'll notice that there's some issues here. You can see this inside barrel that doesn't belong there. So we'll need to clean this up. But this is the perfect place to start with changing out the wheels on any car with any wheel. This is the key here because you could literally just go back to the internet, grab another wheel, and then you pop it into this hole, and you can see now in a matter of minutes, we can see what different wheels look like on this car using Photoshop. So this is fine if we just want to quickly see what the wheel looks like on the car, but this is not going to fly if we're doing this professionally, if we're trying to make this actually look good and really dial it in. So we want to dial in this barrel part of the car. We need to mask out the barrel of the wheel that's showing through here so that we can actually make this wheel look like it's on the car. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to set up a layer mask on this layer. So this is layer 2. This will be our wheel layer, that Kansai. And I'm just going to go down here to the layer mask icon. I'm going to clip that, and it's going to make a new layer mask on top of this layer. Now, the next problem to solve is how do we mask out just the barrel part of this wheel? There's a few ways that we can do this. Probably the most precise way would be to use the pin tool and then make a selection based on the pin. I'm not going to do that in this video because there's actually a little bit of an easier way. And on a lot of wheels, this will work. You notice we used the magic wand tool before. And the magic wand tool is going to allow us to change the tolerance so that we can capture just portions, the grays that we want to capture with the barrel. And so let's start with where we were before. We had the tolerance set at 25. I think that's going to be too high, but let's just click on this gray and see what it selects. Yeah, and so it's selecting a bunch of the spoke here. That's way too much. So Command or Control D, that will release any selection. It'll deselect, and then we'll go back up here to the tolerance, and let's just change it down to 10. See what that gets us. And I'm going to click again in that gray area, and that's pretty close. But it is still clipping a little bit of the spoke of the wheel. And we don't want that. We want to get this selection as close as possible. So I'm going to, again, Command or Control and the letter D. And then we're going to change this tolerance down just a little bit more. Let's take it down to 7. And that's looking near perfect right there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through and on any parts that are the barrel of the wheel, I'm going to make sure that I'm selecting that. So holding down the Shift key to add to my selection, and then selecting those areas. I'm also going to select this area that we already selected. There's actually nothing there. So if I remove the brake, you can see that there's actually nothing there. But selecting that blank area and then up into the gray area that captures the barrel of the wheel. And then also down here, catch all of this. And I'm okay with this edge a little bit down here because we're going to clean that up with the brush later. But you'll see that it doesn't capture everything. I can click in here all day and it'll just start to capture little tiny chunks. And so I'm going to come in here with my lasso tool and I'm just going to refine that. And I just hit the L key. That's the quick key for lasso, or you can go up here to the lasso tool and I'm going to hold down the shift key. With any selection tool, if you hold down shift, it will add to an existing selection. And so you don't have to start over or anything crazy like that. And there we go. We've got that masked out. And again, up here on the back side of the spoke, catch all of this trash that it didn't select before. I'm actually going to catch a little bit of this curve just to even that out. And I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to zoom back out and now making sure that I have my layer mask selected, not just the layer, but the mask itself. I'm going to go up here to my brush tool. And so I'm just going to hit the B key, or you can go up to the brush tool over here on your toolbar. But I'm going to go in here with my brush tool. I'm just going to gently start to blend this back so that it looks like it's actually a barrel of a wheel and it's going back into the car. Pretty simple. I'm going to adjust the size of my brush for this area down here because that's a little bit of a sharper edge. And we can just work that in. And I'm just doing this literally with my mouse. I could use my pen tablet to do this as well, but you don't need a pen tablet to do this technique. And now it looks like we've got a pretty good selection here. So I'm going to go ahead and deselect. I'm happy with that. And now we can come back in here, still on our layer mask. We can just clean up a little bit of these edges here to make it nice and crisp and clean. And then I actually am going to go with the eraser tool. I'm going to come back right along this inner edge and brighten it up just a little bit. Not a huge change, but just right there on the edge. I'm going to brighten that edge just a little bit. I'm just bringing some of that image back into focus, back from the mask. And now you've got this pretty much dialed in. Little bit of artifact right there. Okay. And now when we zoom out, now we look like we have a wheel that actually fits on this car. Let's put the brake back in there. And we can actually drop the brake opacity down just a little bit more, just to dial that in. Make it look like it's actually sitting inside that wheel. But I mean, that's a wheel and brake upgrade if I've ever seen one. That is awesome. And that definitely deserves a congratulations. You have mastered level 1 of replacing the wheels on this car. So now let's keep going so that we can level up and become experts. And so now what we want to do is get this onto the rear wheel. And again, because this is all on the same plane, we can basically just copy and paste what we did on the front wheel. So I'm going to activate this ellipse layer number 2. That is the mask over the rear wheel. It's not a mask, but we're coloring over the wheel. And then I'm going to take these 2 layers. I'm going to duplicate the wheel and the brakes. And then I'm just going to move them on top of that back layer. And you'll see what it did is it removed it from the front wheel, which is fine. But now we can clip both layers down to the rear wheel. And then I'm going to transform these to the back wheel. So using Command or Control T, that's going to activate our free transform. And then we're going to just slide this layer pack back here to the back wheel. We'll zoom in a little bit so we can see what we're doing. And now, again, we just line up the barrel of the wheel and you can free transform both layers at the same time. So I'm going to hold down the Command or Control key. And I'm just going to grab this layer. It's going to take a little bit of adjusting, a little bit of skewing, but because the angles are actually still basically the same angle, it's not going to skew it too much. And now that we've got this bead lined up right with the edge of our shape, and I'm going to hit the enter key. And now you can see that we've got both wheels that are changed on the car. And so on a vehicle where all of your angles are the same, this is going to be a great way to do this. And of course, at this point, we can continue to dial this in for quite a while. I would actually probably spend another good 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, really dialing in the shadows, putting some shadows back here on the brakes. And so, this is not by any means 100% done. But for a quick render of putting some wheels on a car that don't actually belong on this car, this will work. So let's get back to this version of this photo. So we've got two different angles. What you're going to notice is that we can use that same wheel. We're going to grab all of these layers. I'm just going to drag this over to this photo, and that's going to be really small. Resolution is going to be way off. Actually, that might actually work. All right, for the purposes of this video, I'm going to make this work because it doesn't actually look that bad. So let me get this to a size that actually works with this car. And what you'll notice is that this can actually work with the angle of this front wheel. However, the problem happens when we get to the back wheel. So let's do the same treatment on this one. And what we want to do is actually we want to start with a selection for the front wheel. Now, the other thing that's going to make this more of a pro level edit is that you'll see some of this wheel is cut off. So we can't just simply create a circle because you're going to start to cut into the fender of the car. So instead of doing that, what we're going to do, just take the pen tool. Letter P is your quick key, your hot key for the pen tool, or you can obviously find it over here on your tool panel. And we're going to zoom in, make sure that we're nice and close. And I like to start on the side where the fender is. So let's go ahead and start right there on the edge of the fender. I want to get as close to the edge of the fender as I can. And so if you want to zoom in more, you can. I've done this quite a lot. This is one of the first things I learned how to do when I was using Photoshop and wanted to edit cars. But then getting a nice angle here and just coming up until you hit again that bead where that bead of the wheel would be. And so you might have to adjust these angles, your anchor points every once in a while just to make sure you've got the cleanest selection possible. And right up to where the bead is, perfect. Okay, and now we could do the rest just like a half circle. So, uh, make an anchor point. I'm going to hold down the shift key and drag until I get a curve that matches the curve of the wheel. And I'm going to come down around another quarter of the wheel. I'm going to make another anchor point, hold down my shift key, and you should be able to get a nice curve that matches the curvature of the wheel. Hold down the shift key. All right, and then this is where we're going to have to we might have to adjust this. Yeah, we're going to need to adjust that. So I'm going to Control Z. That's going to open back up my pen tool selection. And then I'm going to actually hit this curve a little bit sooner. And now we've got a selection. Okay, so now we've got the same thing we had on the first one. Nice selection. So what we want to do is make this color match whatever the darkest color is. And in here, it's almost like a brown. It's not a true black, but that is what the shadows are because of the way they've edited this photo and the way they've done the color adjustments. That's what we're seeing here. And now I want to grab these wheel components. So I need to get rid of this other ellipse that we created from the other Photoshop file. And then I'm just going to grab all of these wheel components here. And again, I'm going to hover in between the layers and I'm going to hold down the Alt key. And then I'm going to start to add these to this wheel selection. And now we can simply start to adjust this. So I'm going to select all of these layers. Let's get this dialed in here. I just want to get that bead right up to where the edge of the bead is on the tire. And then what you'll notice is that we've got this angle. So really the best thing you can do is line it up as best as you can see where this would go behind the fender. And now we have got this wheel on this car. We can go in again, add some shadow back in there. And the shadow that we would want to choose would be the darkest color that's in the photo itself. Come back up here. Of course, there's going to be some shadow because the fender's in front of it. You might see a couple of spots where you may need to adjust your shape. But overall, you have now got this front wheel masked in. And now we get to this pro level edit because the front wheel matches up just fine. We can work with that. But this rear wheel, if I were to take these elements from the front wheel, put them on their own layer, and then try to use these on this back wheel. And I just want to get a nice mask over this rear wheel. So now we've got this ellipse basically masking out the wheel. Now what's going to happen is that if we clip these down and then free transform and move them back here, we can start to line up the beat, that it starts to lose all of its depth and this wheel starts to look really bad. So what we need to do is actually have photo of the wheel in a different position. And this is where it's great that we have this alternate photo of the wheel because essentially we already have what we need. Now, if we didn't have this on the site we were looking at, you'd need to do an additional search. So go to Google, Bing, whatever you want to use, and just search for that specific wheel and try to find a version of the wheel that has this more extreme angle to it. But for this one, it's great because we can just do the same thing. So we'll save this image down to our computer. And so now with the alternate angle of this wheel downloaded, we can just drag and drop that image into Photoshop. And what we want to do is just start to manipulate this so that it actually lines up with the right angle of the car. That looks about right. I'm actually going to duplicate that layer. I'm going to rasterize this one so that way it resets where my anchor points are. And now, if I want to make this easier on myself, we can actually just kind of get rid of some stuff here. So let's free transform, Command or Control T, move this down, take my eraser tool and just get rid of all this extra stuff. And actually on the barrel, you don't even need that. So it doesn't matter that I'm erasing it. That should make my transformation tool much easier to handle. Command or Control T, perfect. Now we can get this dialed in. So let's make this about the right size that we need. And then I'm going to actually just kind of take this layer and I'm going to stick it right on top of where the brakes are for that rear wheel. And you'll notice that we're still going to have to skew this. However, it's not going to be as extreme and it's going to make it look a lot nicer. So we're going to get that bead right to that edge. And then this bead, I'm actually going to put it just outside of that edge. Make sure that we're getting the bead on the back side, but then leaving some edge on the front side. That's going to give us a little bit more depth and help it to actually make it look like it fits with the car. And now what we do, dial it in with some shadow, some shading, a little bit of light. And now you can see that it actually looks a lot better, a lot more realistic than if we had just stuck that front wheel onto the back wheel of this car. Now, this can get dialed in a little bit more. I probably will dial this in a little bit more, but for the most part, this is a great starting point for locking this in on a pro level. Now it's just about the adjustment layers, adjusting everything so it looks right and making sure that everything matches together. And also, I think the ride height on this car is not as great as it could be.